These strikers were too big to argue with, and you'll be glad to hear they got what they wanted.
Did you know that some everyday things we take for granted today were actually illegal in the 1950s? In the 50s, societal norms and laws often clashed, leading to bans on unconventional behaviors and items. Join us as we delve into this intriguing chapter of history to uncover 20 weird things in the 1950s that were illegal.
Who wants an alcoholic fish?
Good question. That's why in Ohio it is illegal to get fish drunk.
In 1950, Ohio faced an odd question. Is it illegal to get a fish drunk? Surprisingly, there was no specific law against intoxicating fish in the Buckeye State. That meant that if someone wanted to host a fish cocktail party, they were technically within legal bounds. However, before mixing fish-sized martinis, it's important to consider other factors. Ohio has laws protecting animals from cruelty and mistreatment. While there is no explicit mention of intoxicated fish, causing them unnecessary harm or distress could still be an issue. Fish, like all creatures, deserve respect and care. Furthermore, fish thrive in clean water and spacious tanks, far from any booze. Ensuring a healthy environment is crucial for their well-being, so while getting them tipsy is not explicitly illegal, responsible pet ownership, which includes providing suitable habitat, is essential for their happiness and your peace of mind. In Ohio in 1950, the legality of getting a fish drunk sparked curiosity. But what about crossing state lines with a duck on your head? Let's explore Minnesota's quirky myths and laws next.
In Minnesota, it's actually illegal to cross state lines with a duck on your head. Yeah, you heard that right.
Minnesota was rumored to have a quirky law that supposedly banned crossing state lines with a duck on your head in 1950. Imagine travelers with ducks perched on their noggins, waddling across borders like avian ambassadors. However, this law never actually existed. Minnesota never officially disapproved of people wearing ducks as hats while traveling. So, if you ever wanted to sport a duck on your head while driving to Wisconsin, you could quack away without any legal worries. But why did this myth arise? It originated from a local tale, a playful rumor, or perhaps someone just wanted to see if they could pull off a duck chic look without getting into trouble. Today, ducks remain blissfully unaware of their potential as headgear. Meanwhile, Minnesota focuses on real issues, like its 10,000 lakes and the occasional mosquito invasion.
I'd also like to get airborne to enjoy the freedom of the skies. The Soviet champion parachutists include a high percentage of free-falling females.
In 1952, Florida passed a strange law that stopped unmarried women from parachuting on Sundays. This rule was meant to follow societal standards and keep moral behavior. However, the law was seldom enforced, and most people didn't even know it existed. Picture a sunny Sunday in Florida, the excitement of skydiving calling, but single women were not legally allowed to take that thrilling jump.
Latest in thrills, a real parachute drop. But just in case you might hit the ground too hard, there's a string attached and there's no danger. Luckily, the girls who paid $250 to get a new parachute.
In 2005, when common sense finally won, Florida got rid of this outdated law, letting unmarried women skydive any day of the week. This legal change was part of a bigger trend across the U.S., where other odd laws, like Michigan's rule against swearing in front of women and children, were also removed. These changes marked a shift towards more reasonable and modern legal standards, reflecting the evolving societal norms and values in the country. Now, everyone in Florida could enjoy the thrill of skydiving, regardless of their marital status.
The gunner rarely misses. The harpoon itself is about 4 feet long and weighs about 100 pounds. It carries an explosive head which kills the whale.
In 1951, Nebraska, a landlocked state better known for its cornfields and anything maritime, passed a peculiar law. It banned whale fishing. But why such a law? Interestingly, there were no whales in Nebraska's rivers or lakes. The law seemed to be a whimsical nod to the state's geological past. Millions of years ago, Nebraska was covered by a vast inland sea. Fossils of ancient marine creatures, including giant sharks and sea turtles, have been found there. So perhaps someone thought, why not whales too? Imagine a determined Nebraskan, bucket in hand, standing by the Platte River, hoping to catch a massive whale. Unfortunately, no whales ever swam in the state's waterways, but the law remained a quirky relic of legislative imagination. While there's no record of Nebraska lawmakers discussing whale fishing, instead, the law quietly faded away, like a phantom whale slipping beneath the waves. In 1950, Iowa had a peculiar law that made it illegal for men with mustaches to kiss women in public. Men had to shave their mustaches if they wanted to show affection openly. Imagine couples sneaking a kiss on a park bench, only to be stopped by a stern officer saying, "Sir, your mustache is a problem." There was another unusual rule. Kisses in public couldn't last longer than 5 minutes. So, even if you found a clean-shaven partner, you had to make your kisses quick. Having a stopwatch might have been just as important as having fresh breath. Thankfully, these odd laws didn't last. As time went on, they disappeared like old love letters. By the mid-20th century, Iowa realized that love shouldn't be limited by facial hair. In 1950, men with mustaches couldn't kiss women in public. But what about Alabama's law against opening umbrellas on the street? How did such rules shape daily life? Let's explore.
Umbrella manufacturers are certainly making the best of it with models like this one for our famous English Rose. With this, she can keep pretty dry.
In 1950, Alabama had an unusual law. Opening an umbrella on a street was illegal. Doing so could get you into legal trouble. So why was this the case? During a time when cars were not as common, horses were still a regular sight on the streets. Imagine a busy Montgomery with raindrops falling and people reaching for their umbrellas. Now, think of a startled horse, its hooves clattering as an umbrella suddenly opens. This could lead to chaos, a runaway horse, overturned carts, and possibly soak pedestrians.
Britain's umbrella makers stage their first ever fashion show in London and feature styles like this picture hat umbrella, which really are as right as rain.
This law made sense in its historical context. Opening an umbrella could easily frighten horses, causing accidents. In a society where horse-drawn carriages were common, this seemingly strange rule aimed to prevent such disasters. Fast forward to today, when cars have replaced horses and our streets are now umbrella-friendly. The law quietly disappeared, much like raindrops evaporating on a sunny day. This quirky piece of history remains a reminder of how much our world has changed. In 1950, California had an unusual law. It was illegal to wiggle while dancing. Yes, that's right. No shimmying, shaking, or swaying allowed on the dance floor. The state was determined to keep its dancers as stiff and straight as possible. The reason behind this anti-wiggle law was perhaps lawmakers thought that wild dancing like jitterbugging and jiving would lead to chaos, with one wiggle causing a domino effect. Or they feared too much hip movement could cause dizziness and result in dance-related accidents. Despite the strange reasoning, this law didn't last long. By the 60s, Californians began to rebel against the no-wiggle rule. Disco balls were spinning, twist contests were happening, and the dance floors were full of lively movement. This anti-wiggle law quietly disappeared, much like a forgotten dance step.
Big Christmas displays, the Regent Street decorations. Every year it's something different. This year it's Edwardian balloons.
In 1951, Maine had a strange law that caught people's attention during the holiday season. This unusual rule made it illegal to keep Christmas decorations up past January the 14th. It meant your Christmas lights, inflatable snowmen, and tinsel had to come down before midnight on the 14th. The reason behind this festive deadline was lawmakers wanted to stop prolonged holiday cheer from interfering with everyday life. Or perhaps they thought that keeping decorations up too long would disrupt the normal flow of things. Despite the uncertainty, the law was in place, and some areas in Maine took it very seriously. Don't worry, though, about getting thrown in jail for leaving your decorations up too long. It just resulted in fines. However, in 2013, the Portland Press-Herald debunked this myth. They confirmed that no such law ever existed in Maine, putting to rest the quirky tale of holiday decoration regulations. After learning about Maine's once-debated Christmas decoration law, Did you know Georgia once enforced strict rules on foul language near the deceased? What's next in our journey through unusual laws? Let's explore Georgia's intriguing legal history.
Heads bowed in deference to the passing of the great lady, whose favorite hymn spoken at these services began, "O Lord, make me an instrument of your peace."
In 1950, Georgia had a surprising law that made it illegal to use obscene and vulgar or profane language in the presence of a female or of a male under the age of 14. Imagine a solemn funeral with mourners gathered around a casket and someone blurting out a curse word. Such an act could get you in trouble back then. The law aimed to maintain respect during serious moments, but it had its peculiarities. Accidentally swearing while paying your respects could lead to a breach of the peace charge. The exact reason behind this prohibition is unclear, but it likely stemmed from a desire to respect the deceased and their grieving loved ones. But in 1968, and the law was still in effect but faced constitutional scrutiny. In a case involving an 11-year-old girl who encountered an offensive driver, the Georgia Supreme Court upheld the law's constitutionality. The court reasoned that such language wasn't protected free speech because it lacked social value. Alvin Bruot, convicted under this law, couldn't escape his 1-year jail sentence.
Garland, Utah, Operation Little Vittles is now flown by scores of U.S. pilots. They're just about the most popular men in Germany today.
In 1953, Idaho supposedly had a sweet and quirky law. It was allegedly illegal for a man to gift his sweetheart a box of candy weighing less than 50 pounds. But this law is likely more fiction than fact. Despite its internet fame, there's no evidence Idaho ever officially passed such a law. No statute books mention the 50-pound candy requirement. So how did this delightful myth spread? Blame it on mischievous publishers and websites. They love collecting quirky ordinances and selling them as teasers in books. Some are true, but most are pure whimsy. If you are hoping for a mountain of chocolate this Valentine's Day, fear not. You won't need a forklift to deliver your sweetheart's gift. Enjoy your sweets in manageable portions, knowing you aren't breaking any Idaho laws. This charming myth, while fun to imagine, remains just that, a myth. In 1950, Illinois had a strange law that made it illegal to whistle on Sundays. These laws, known as blue laws, were meant to encourage people to observe religious practices and limit certain activities on Sundays. The goal was to promote a day of rest and participation in church services. Sunday was considered a sacred day, and anything that disturbed its peace was looked down upon. Whistling, seen as noisy, was therefore deemed inappropriate. Interestingly, the law wasn't just about whistling. It applied to any unnecessary noise. Singing too loudly, playing musical instruments, or even revving car engines could get you into legal trouble. Fortunately, this unusual law didn't last forever. By the middle of the 20th century, attitudes were changing and people began questioning the need for such strict rules. In 1961, Illinois finally got rid of the ban on whistling and other noisy activities on Sundays. This allowed residents to freely enjoy their music, whether it was a cheerful tune on a lazy Sunday afternoon or any form of musical expression.
1,300 luxury seats with a 60-foot screen doing justice to the epic dramas of which only the cinema is capable.
In 1952, Indiana had an unusual law. It was illegal to go to a movie theater or ride a public streetcar within 4 hours of eating garlic. Yes, you heard that right, garlic. The flavorful bulb used in cooking and known for warding off vampires had its own set of rules. But why such a strong reaction to garlic? The lawmakers worried that people with garlic breath might disturb others in movie theaters or offend fellow passengers on streetcars. Imagine someone munching on garlic bread during a movie matinee. Their breath is strong as a dragon's fire. The historical records don't provide a definitive answer. Maybe a prominent garlic farmer pushed for the law, or perhaps a local vampire hunter wanted to ensure people respected garlic's reputed protective powers. Whatever the origins, the law was real. Luckily, by the 1960s, Indiana reconsidered. In 1963, they repealed the garlic prohibition, allowing Hoosiers to enjoy garlic in their meals and go to the movies without fear of breaking the law. After navigating Indiana's quirky garlic law, where moviegoers and streetcar riders feared the wrath of garlic breath, what's next? Ever considered catching fish with your bare hands in Kansas? Let's explore this unique fishing regulation.
Submarine hunters didn't do too badly, the prize-winning catch being a 10-pounder.
In 1951, Kansas had a strange rule that made it illegal to catch fish using only your hands. Lawmakers thought hand fishing upset the natural balance or harmed the fish populations. They also worried about spontaneous wrestling matches in the water, with people yelling, "Tag, you're it," while grappling with catfish. Regardless of their reasons, the law was clear: no catching fish barehanded. Breaking this rule meant facing fines, penalties, and possibly ending up with wet sleeves. Thankfully, things changed. By the 1960s, Kansas reconsidered. Today, hand fishing for flathead catfish is allowed, but only from June the 15th till August the 31st, and only in specific places like the Arkansas River, federal reservoirs, and the Kansas River. However, there's a twist. You need a special permit, and you can't use hooks, scuba gear, or any other man-made tools. So while Kansans can now hand fish under certain conditions, they still have to follow some strict rules to do it legally.
The groom was there, the bridesmaid was there, the page boys were there, and at last, 20 minutes late, the bride was there.
In 1953, Kentucky lawmakers made an unusual decision regarding marriage. They imposed a limit on how many times a woman could remarry the same man. 4 times was the maximum. The law aimed to curb what they saw as excessive remarriages between the same partners. It was a quirky attempt to prevent what might have seemed like a cycle of I do, I don't, I do, I don't. During that time, divorce was less common, and it was more typical for separated spouses to reconcile rather than permanently part ways. Lawmakers were concerned that allowing unlimited remarriages could trivialize the institution of marriage, turning it into something people entered and exited without much consideration. Hence, the 4-marriage limit was put into place. In 2004, Kentucky's Constitution defined marriage as strictly between one man and one woman. However, this law didn't stand the test of time. In 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling in Obergefell v. Hodges legalized same-sex marriage nationwide, making Kentucky's restrictions on marriage, including the quirky 4-marriage limit, obsolete. Love ultimately prevailed over legal red tape, ensuring that individuals could marry and even remarry whoever they choose. In 1950, Louisiana lawmakers made a rule against making loud, gargling noises in public places. They were worried about keeping public places clean and peaceful. Imagine if someone was loudly gargling near the French Quarter or during a jazz show. It wouldn't fit the atmosphere they wanted, so they decided no gargling in public. Imagine people walking along the streets, trying not to gargle out loud because they get in trouble with the law. Maybe they'd go quickly into a quiet spot to rinse their mouth and spit discreetly. Nowadays, police aren't running after people who gargle, but technically, the law still exists. So if you ever visit Louisiana and feel the need to gargle, it might be best to find a restroom or a quiet place. In 1950s Louisiana, gargling loudly in public could lead to trouble with the law. Meanwhile, in Maine, laws focused on preventing inappropriate physical contact. Such regulation shapes societal norms by promoting a sense of decorum and propriety, reinforcing expectations for public behavior and interpersonal interactions. Let's explore.
One day we're going to tickle you.
Well, now you see you're getting it.
I'm going to keep tickling you all over. Stop it.
Tickling a woman under the chin with a feather duster was surprisingly illegal in Maine in 1952. The law aimed to prevent any form of physical contact that could be deemed offensive or inappropriate in public spaces. It reflected societal norms of the time, emphasizing modesty and decorum in social interactions, even playful ones. The law was passed due to the cultural context of the 1950s, where attitudes toward gender roles and public behavior were more conservative. Such laws often sought to uphold standards of morality and etiquette, though they seem peculiar by today's standards. This particular law was eventually abolished in Maine as societal attitudes towards public behavior and gender roles evolved over time. This law's history sheds light on the broader social dynamics and perceptions of gender and public conduct during the mid-20th century in the U.S. In 1951, Massachusetts passed a strange law. Snoring was outlawed unless all bedroom windows were tightly shut and locked. Lawmakers argued that open windows amplified snores, disturbing neighbors' peace across neighborhoods. But how loud must one snore to justify such extreme measures? And could closed windows really contain the noise? Imagine a snorer, asleep with their window open, oblivious to the law that hovered over them. Oddly, while bedroom windows had to be sealed, other windows in the house could stay wide open, like those in the kitchen, living room, or basement. Fortunately, this law is no longer enforced today, though it remains a quirky footnote in Massachusetts legal history.
Finishing in grand style, they'll soon have another prize for the sideboard. And if they're too excited to sleep tonight, well, they can always count sheep.
In 1950, Montana had an unusual law. It was illegal to drive with a sheep inside your truck's cab unless you had someone watching over it. This law came about because there were concerns about sheep being stolen. Montana's wide open spaces made it easy for thieves to take sheep unnoticed. To tackle this problem, the state introduced the Sheep Truck Chaperone Law. If you wanted to transport a sheep in your truck, you had to have someone responsible sitting with the sheep to prevent theft. Today, the law has been relaxed somewhat. You can still transport sheep in a truck designed for carrying livestock, but you can't have them inside the cab without someone keeping an eye on them. This rule ensures that sheep are protected from potential theft during transportation. Though the original law was quite strict, it intended to safeguard livestock from being stolen in Montana's expansive rural areas. In Montana, a law required a sheep's cab companion to prevent theft. How did unusual laws shape local norms elsewhere? Well, let's explore New Jersey's soup slurping ban and its cultural contrast. Back in 1952, New Jersey had a rather unusual law. It was against the rules to slurp your soup. But why would a state outlaw something as simple as sipping soup? Even the official website of the New Jersey Judiciary doesn't explain why it was put into place. It's possible that a serious lawmaker had strong feelings against noisy eaters, or perhaps they worried that too much soup slurping would disturb the peace of the Garden State. Interestingly, not everyone frowns upon slurping soup. In many cultures, it's actually seen as a gesture of respect or even thought to enhance the flavor of the soup. Studies have even found that people who slurp their soup tend to enjoy it more than those who eat quietly. So, New Jersey's law against slurping may not have considered these cultural and culinary perspectives. In the end, this quirky law stands as a reminder of how local rules and customs can sometimes puzzle outsiders. While New Jersey's stance on soup slurping may have been rooted in concerns about noise or decorum, it contrasts sharply with attitudes towards soup in other parts of the world.
These strikers were too big to argue with, and you'll be glad to hear they got what they wanted.
In 1950, North Carolina enacted a law prohibiting the use of elephants to plow cotton fields, which sounds bizarre today. The law was a response to concerns about animal cruelty and safety. Elephants were occasionally used in agriculture during that time due to their strength. Still, the practice raised issues about the well-being of the animals and the potential dangers involved. The law was passed primarily to protect elephants from overwork and mistreatment, as well as to prevent accidents that could harm both the animals and their handlers. Interestingly, elephants were still legally used in circuses and other entertainment venues, highlighting the specific concern about their use in agricultural labor. This unusual law remained in effect until it was officially abolished in 1953. By then, mechanization in farming had also advanced significantly, rendering the use of elephants for plowing obsolete. The prohibition marked a shift towards more humane and efficient agricultural practices, reflecting changing attitudes towards animal welfare and the adoption of modern farming technology.